Alright guys, what's going on? So, we got your body out. First thing that we're going to do, we're going to sand the entire surface here with 400 grit. We need to make sure that there's no glue residue in between any of these seams, in around the binding, nothing like that. There can't be any glue residue. You have to remember, whatever little things of glue that were left on there from just carelessness when they were building it, your stain, your tint, whatever you're using will not absorb into it. So you have to get it off of there. When I got mine, I already did this, I already pretty much finished mine, but when I did get this in, right here where my cap's coming together, there was definitely some yellow coloring inside right here that you could just barely see. Still a little bit right there actually. So you don't want to sand it too much. Obviously this is a veneer, it's still really thin. You still got to be very careful about what you're doing. If you sand through it on the edges, which is where you most likely would end up sanding it through, a lot of people do, you'll have a spot where the stain won't absorb into it how it's supposed to. Also you'll lose your flame. So be very careful when you're first doing this, but you got to remember these are not, and I've seen these on YouTube a lot, these are not really ready to get stained right out of the box. A lot of people start staining them and there's little parts up in here, like this one kid on the YouTube, he was doing it and there was a whole section right up in here that wasn't absorbing the stain. It's because this whole thing had glue on it. So you have to first, when you get it out, make sure you rough sand with 400. I like to go over it with 6 after I'm done with that. I don't use a block or nothing, I just get it right in my hand. Kind of just, you know, go over it nice and make sure that you got it all. You don't want to go too rough, you just want to make sure there's no glue on it, at least on the top for now. I did have a little bit of glue right in this area, right where the binding meets. You can still maybe see some glue in there. We'll get that in a little bit later, but for now we're just gonna rough sand it. Make sure it's all rough sanded. Make sure you've got all the sawdust off of there once you're done. And we'll move on to step 2, which is the black tint we're gonna put on it. Whew. Okay guys, so we got it rough sanded. Make sure there's no sawdust on here, and just remember guys, like this isn't this isn't like the gospel here of how you do things. Okay, this is the first time I've done this to myself, but just watching a lot of videos I decided to attempt it. But one thing I did see from a lot of the videos was people using because the way that a lot of good flames jump out, you know, when you get the nice stripes in these flames, one way to really make that happen better is not only just applying the tint that you want. Maybe if you're going amber, you could put amber on here and they'd look pretty good, but a lot of manufacturers put down an initial black tint and then they sand that tint off, and all these grain stripes in the wood absorb that black color, and then you sand it off and you leave the in between spots nice and as white as you can. Then you put your amber tint on there, and those lines just really pop out. They're really dark and refined. And it also just darkens the whole thing up just a little bit, just to give it some real depth in it, which is kind of what I'm going for. I want a real kind of dark, rich, dark amber striped look, which is pretty similar to what his actual guitar is. So, what do we got here? We are going to use, I've seen a lot of guys doing this, it seems to work pretty good, so I thought I'd try it. We have some refillable stamp ink here. Just got this at Staples for like $3. Got a little bit of water here, no real set to how much is in there. I'm just going to kind of see how it works here. So, kind of stir it up. I put maybe like 3 good squirts in there, maybe 2.5, 3 good squirts. So, alright, let's try it. Let's crush your fingers. I got a little piece of paper towel here. I'm just going to dip it in. I kind of made it in the shape of like an applicator pad, just kind of with my hand here. You want to put this on as even as you can, and you want to keep moving. You don't want to blotch it up in one spot really heavy. Remember, we just need those lines to pop. We don't need this to sit there and soak all the way through to the mahogany, because we got to sand this back off. We do not want to sand through this veneer. So we want to get the dark color, but we don't want to have to use a lot of water and a lot of color to actually go through it. We really just want to get the top as good and colored as we can, just the very top. So let's get going and try this. And if this isn't dark enough, which it might not be, we'll go back and try. Alright, ready? Yeah, this isn't dark enough, I can tell. Yep, we need it darker. Okay, that's okay. And I'm already kind of seeing a problem here. It looks like this paper towel is going to start shredding on me with the way I want to do it. So I'm going to toss that, and I'm going to get a little rag. So 1 second. Okay, I'm back. I got a kind of just a shop towel that we got around here. It's like a little hand towel size. Obviously I put some more ink in here. And you got to remember too, when you do put water in this, as you might know, maple's a very, very absorbent wood, so it absorbs water like crazy. So when you do start touching this with water, it's gonna raise. You're gonna start feeling it's kind of rough. I can feel it right now. It's rough. It's not from the paper towel either. It's actually rougher. So you kind of do got to use something, as I'm seeing here now. You got to use something kind of coarse just to kind of make yourself able to actually rub it in. Ooh, got some ink there. Okay, so let's try this again with the paper towel. Kind of same principle. I'm going to kind of shape it like an applicator, so to speak. Oh yeah, much nicer. Ooh. Got some spots here. I don't know what those are. Okay, well, we applied it. Kind of a first coat here. I'm seeing some really weird things coming out. I don't know what this is. If something might be on this, maybe. I'm kind of confused by it, to be honest with you. So I'll just give you an update once it dries. We'll see what it looks like. Alright guys, so we're back. What you saw happen there was I actually didn't sand it enough, so there's a good learning lesson for everybody. You really got to sand it out. I actually, in between the cuts, I sanded that black off just a little bit and really targeted some of the areas that were showing through, especially up in here. As you can see, that up in here looks nice now. It was all blotchy, so I just didn't sand enough, which is totally fine. That's a good little learning lesson for everybody. Like, you really got to sand these things pretty good. You got to really rough sand them. If anybody's seen Fred Yen's video on this, which is like the hugest one that there is on YouTube about these DIY Les Paul kits, he sands it down to 220 grit. Now the reason why I want to stick to 400, one, I don't have 320, and I don't want to go down to 220. That's to me maybe a little bit too, a little too coarse. And in his video, he also sanded through to the edge of his laminate. So this is pretty good. We're gonna let this dry. We'll come back once this is dry. This is still a little wet. You can see this line right here. That is glue. So like I said, it's very important that you make sure you get that glue off. There's a little tiny bit up here that you... So what I'm going to do though, this is pretty good. I got a lot of it and I re-stained it, and it looks way better. I can use this. Once this dries, I am going to go back over it with 400. I'm going to sand the entire top with 400 grit, and I'm going to focus on a couple of these areas, and that should pretty much get it right here, right here. You know, just some really tiny, small areas, maybe right in there a little bit more. Just kind of focus on some of those areas, and then you know, before I sand the entire thing clean, or fairly clean, and then that should take care of it and prepare it for the next step, which is the amber stain. So it's pretty dry right now. We're gonna go over it with a block because I found that pretty much works the best. Not any block, one that gives. You want a foam block. And we're gonna do it with 400 grit. I like 400 grit. If I had 320, I'd probably use something like 320. I wouldn't do 220. I think that's too coarse again. I just think that's too much. So we're gonna try it with 400. That seems to work pretty well. You really got to work at it because, you know, maple's a hard wood, but it's worth it. Trust me, it's worth the security of not going through the veneer to the normal maple. Because if you do, it's gonna look horrible when you try to stain it. It's not gonna absorb. It's gonna be like glue. It's not gonna absorb into it the same way as the flame goes. It's just going to look bad. But this is a good start. This is pretty good. Like I said, I just touched up some of the sanding parts where the glue still was, and then all I did was after that there was some white spots. I literally just took my rag, dipped it in the black, went right back over the whole thing again, and it cleared right up. It soaked into everything that I sanded really nice. So without further ado, let's get sanding this thing and get it ready for the amber tint. So, just remember, when you are sanding this, we're doing 400 grit. We're doing pretty good. we're getting along, as you can see. It's starting to look actually really, really good. Just remember, when you're sanding this, we're getting it ready for the yellow to come on here, the amber color. So just keep in mind that if you see here, you can see some of the areas right in here are more white. You know, some areas here and up here, they're a little bit more white. That's just obviously we've sanded there more. But just keep in mind that when you put that yellow on here, the areas that are more white, where you've sanded off more of the black, they're going to be brighter. It doesn't matter how much tint that you put in that area. It's just going to be always going to be lighter in that area. So as you're sanding it off, do keep in mind that you do want a very uniform look. If you don't get all the little cloudy spots out, it's going to be cloudy right there. You know, you can see the little bit of a puddle up here of still some black in this area, how it's kind of cloudy. For me, I want it to get to about right here. I want to sand it just till I get about the stripes coming through, so that they're all individualized. I do want mine to be a little bit darker personally, so that's why I'm kind of keeping it more, a little bit more darker. I'm not going to sand this down till it's white. If you did want it like that, you could sand it down more. I kind of want it right here. I still want it to be pretty dark. Just want it to be a real deep, kind of burnt yellowish orange color, because that's really what color his original guitar was. A lot closer to, not really just a yellow. So just keep that in mind as you're sanding it, that you definitely still want a uniform look here. You want this to all be about the same color, and then unless of course you are kind of going for an effect, unless you do want some more darker spots, you got to remember this is all subjective. So it's whatever you think that you want. If you want it nice and uniform and symmetrical and straight, kind of like I lean towards, then that's how we're going to do it. If you kind of want to have some of the beauty marks in there and you kind of think that's cool, it's cool. It's all up to you. It's subjective. So whatever you want, but just keep that in mind as you're doing it. It's not about just getting it off. It's also about making it uniform if that's what you're going for. And otherwise, do it how you want to do it. So keep doing this till it's a little bit more clean, and we'll be ready for the amber. Alright guys, so we got her all sanded down. I think this is looking really, really good. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Pretty uniform. Got a couple spots in here that I like. It's kind of maybe a little darker in some areas, and that's perfectly okay. So I'm going to take the rag here, or the towel I got, just get some of the sawdust off. I'm not super worried about up in here because the neck covers all that. So I'm going to wipe this off. There we go. And the tint that I'm using is from Color Tone. It's from StewMac. It's a Color Tone liquid stain. It's the amber, vintage amber. So vintage amber, from what it looked like online, looked pretty cool. Looked pretty dark. I'm going for a pretty dark look here. So, but again, remember this is 2 ounces, which is what the whole bottle is for 2 quarts. So I think as far as the ratio goes, it's probably going to be about as much black as what we used. We'll see though. We'll see kind of what it looks like. This is pretty dark, so I'm going to see, maybe not putting so much in there, what it is going to look like, because I know it's going to be pretty dark. So let's take this. Probably shouldn't be using the towel, but whatever. You know what? Let's use this hand towel. Yeah, this will work. Ruining everybody's hand towels. Alright. And let's see. Cross your fingers. See how this goes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Could even go darker if you wanted to. Well, that's definitely yellow. That looks awesome. There we go. Oh yeah. Wow, that looks awesome. And there you go. She's definitely getting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to put a little bit more in here. I want it just a skosh darker. I'm just gonna rub it on there again. You gotta remember too, maple's very absorbent. I got a little piece of blue tape around the whole body too, just to make sure that we can kind of get it off of the mahogany here, because if this stain runs on the mahogany, it's gonna be a pain sanding it out. And since we are doing kind of more of a natural finish on it, I don't want it to. Okay, so that coat dried, and I'm just going ahead and I even put a little bit more tint in there, which is probably way more you're supposed to use, just because I really want this thing dark. I want it orange. So I'm just really tinting it dark. And there's only so much this wood can take at once, but that's okay. Once we get the coats done, we'll let it all dry. This is really looking cool. I'm pretty happy actually. And you gotta remember too, like there's little spots here. You know, those aren't glue spots, they're just discoloration spots. There's gonna be spots all over this thing. But you know what? That's what makes this thing personal. That's what makes it awesome. You're never gonna notice once your knobs are in here, your pickups are in there really nice. You're not ever gonna bat an eye at it. It's just gonna be a beauty mark at that point. So if it ain't perfect, don't panic. Embrace it, love it, deal with it, enjoy it. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and let that dry. Alright guys, she's pretty much dry. I think I'm gonna let her sit overnight just to finish drying out nice. Little tiny trick too, if you guys are maybe interested in this. If you still got your rag that you put your black stain on, your ink, if there's any spots in this wood that's maybe a little too light for your liking, maybe there's a spot that you sanded just a little too much than the rest, like right here or something like that you don't like, you can take your rag as long as it's just still a little. I wouldn't dip it in the ink, just take it as it was, because it's been drying. It's still a little bit wet, and you could, like for instance right here, take this area right here, you can actually take this rag and just work in just a little bit of darker color there, and that makes that area darker. You can do that across this if you kind of, because I want that kind of dirty blonde. And don't worry, this will dry. That little spot will dry out, and it'll look really nice. Then you can also take your amber. If you kind of want to go back over it, kind of work it in, you can do that too. And kind of just, you know, just blend those colors in. Get the color as even as you want it. There we go. That's looking great. Wow, that looks awesome. And now if you look how uniform that is now. This whole middle area was lighter than this side, just a little bit of these two crowns. Perfectly uniform, beautiful. So that wraps it up for this. Make sure if you're doing this, you definitely have some Slash going. You got some Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver playing. You got Snake Pit, whatever you got. If you got Slash going, make sure you got that. Maybe with some Zakk Wylde or something. That's going to do it for this video. We will be back with part 2, and that will be filling some of the grain on the backs and sides, doing a little bit more sanding, cleaning up the binding on the front, all that type of stuff. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate everything, and we will be back in part 2.